You're listening to Side Hustle Pro, the podcast that teaches you to build and grow a side hustle from passion project to profitable business. And I'm your host, Nicaila Matthews. So let's get started. Welcome back to the show. This is episode 16 of Side Hustle Pro. And today's guest, Denise Sarkor, is a first-year entrepreneur who ventured out on her own after leaving a successful career in operations management. She's now a life and business coach and the founder and CEO of New Roots Development, LLC, which offers coaching, editorial, and publishing services. She's also the author of Clean Closet and has been featured on the Huffington Post. Denise and I actually go way back to the days of undergrad, where we danced together in UPenn's African Rhythms drum and dance troupe. I have proudly watched her pivot from straight-laced banker to entrepreneur, and it's been incredibly inspiring. Why? Because at the age of 5, Denise escaped the Liberian Civil War with her family and once lived as a refugee in Ivory Coast. She was raised in a rough part of New Jersey by her determined mom and would go on to graduate from the Wharton School and obtain her master's in international finance and economic policy from Columbia University. Although entrepreneurship tugged at her heart, she initially took a safer path, working as an international banker and development consultant at Goldman Sachs and the World Bank. But after a devastating divorce rocked her to the core, she became fearless. And on this episode, you'll learn how she honed in on what services she should offer in her business, how she's managing cash flow, and the surprising move she's willing to make to sustain her business. Let's get right into it. Welcome to the show, Denise. Tell us more about what you're currently doing and why.
Hi, Nikki. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and share a little bit more about what I'm doing with your audience. As you mentioned, my name is Denise Sarkor, and I am a life and business coach. I also have a publishing company underneath the umbrella New Roots Development, LLC, where I provide editorial and publishing services, both full-out publishing of books, but also publishing consulting to folks that I call change agents. Now, change agents are you, they're me, they're anyone who is out there trying to affect positive change in the world. I help them tell their stories, and they may not have access to tell their stories through some traditional publishing arms as easily. They may be interested in self-publishing and just need a little support. But whatever the case may be, that's the kind of services that we provide.
Awesome. So you are originally from Liberia. How would you say your upbringing influenced your entrepreneurial spirit?
Well, in so many ways, both of my parents were and are side hustlers in their own right. So, when I was very young, I started to hear stories of my dad. I even witnessed some of it and continue to witness a lot of it today, where around the time I was born, he was working for Public Works in Liberia. But on the side, as a structural engineer, he would provide consulting services. He also went into real estate development in Liberia. At one point, I believe he owned the second largest transportation fleet in the country. So that was kind of cool to know about my father. And my mom, she displayed that after the war, we left Liberia. We were in Ivory Coast as refugees for a while. And when we got to the U.S., I was only 5 at the time. I got to grow up in a single parent household with my mom and all my brothers and watch her give her very best so that we could have opportunities in the U.S. She side hustled like a pro. And so she sewed curtains. She actually sewed for people's weddings. So she would do bridesmaid dresses and even flower girl dresses. I've never known her to have one job. She's always had 2 or more.
Okay.
And so, I learned that from a very young age. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And before we jump into your business and how you started to create that, I want to go back a little bit to your experience. So for a long time, you were following the traditional path. As I mentioned in the intro, Denise and I go way back. So you were at Wharton when I was in the College of Arts and Sciences at Penn. You went into banking, then you worked for the World Bank. What inspired those decisions and how have they helped you with where you are now?
Okay, so I am like a walking brain sometimes. And asked a lot of questions when I was younger. So The long story, I'll try to shorten it though, is that when I was really little, I said to my mom I wanted to build a hospital in Liberia, right? This was like my framework. And I ended up getting full scholarships to college. And I, did really well in the sciences and math in high school. And I actually thought I was going to be a doctor. But when I got to Penn, I was admitted to the Wharton program. I thought I was going to dual major in bio and business, so I could own my own practice one day. But I quickly realized that workload was a little bit too much for me, learning a lot of new concepts, and I wanted to do well and keep my scholarship. So I decided to go the business route. I thought that not necessarily that I wanted to be the doctor in the hospital in Liberia, but I wanted to be the one that was able to raise the funds and actually be a part of the project of building a hospital. So this was my thinking when I was in college. And so like my first job out was all about raising municipal bonds. My first job was with the former Bear Stearns. And I learned how in a developed economy like the US, you can raise, $300 million of bonds to expand a hospital and different things like that. And I learned about hospitals in general, how to finance them. And so that's where all of that learning started. But in 2008, right before my eyes at my first job, I kind of witnessed that bank crumble. You guys probably saw all of that in the news, where overnight it went from, $140 plus a share to $2 a share. And immediately JP Morgan was acquiring the bank, and folks were losing their jobs and losing everything. So I watched folks that were at Bear 20 years plus lose all of their investment in the company because they own a lot of stock, et cetera. And at that moment, I made the transition. I said that I want to do development work, went to the World Bank, and I, worked for them in DC on some really cool projects, learning how to keep the financial economy afloat. Did some stress testing on banks that they had stakes in and they were afraid would fail and bring down the global economy. I was really young and I got to see how those projects worked. But after, 2 to 3 years, the world very quickly learned that, if we're waiting on top-down approaches to solve issues like poverty and failed health systems and all of these things, then we're wasting our time. I left that job and in pursuit of my master's degree at Columbia, where I studied international finance and economics. And while I was there, I really got to think about things and kind of landed on this idea that it's more important to teach a man how to fish so that he could sustain himself going forward.
So you recently wrote a post that delves into this a little bit more. You guys, if you go to denisesarkor.com, I'll link to it in the show notes. It's called The Year I Got in Formation. Okay, the New Root story. Please, let's jump right into that. Tell us about this year and, what inspired this post.
Okay, thanks for asking me that, Nikki. I get clarity from writing, right? It's always been the case. I have about 8 journals. And so this post helped me kind of chronicle both how I got into, sort of a personal formation where I, kind of show the reader how I overcame a very unexpected and painful divorce, and basically how I had to climb out of the depression and just the disappointment after, a perceived failure, right? And then jump into how that eventually resulted in the formation of my company, right? And so, that's what the post entails. But what I love about it most is, interestingly, going through that divorce and healing from it actually gave me the courage to step out and start my first company. Because once you experience something that kind of rocks you to your core, it's almost like nothing else can scare you that much going forward.
Wow. So you were working in operations management, and when did you initially start thinking about entrepreneurship, and when did you know it's time to leave?
Okay, so I think a lot of it had to do with, getting clear in my mind while I was in grad school, actually, that entrepreneurship was the path. but I didn't quite have the confidence right away to jump into it. So you mentioned McMaster-Carr. That was the first job that I took out of graduate school. And it was a really unique opportunity because I started out in finance, and then I did a lot of strategy work, independent consulting, a project in India, one in Ecuador, and just really kind of spread my wings in those areas. But I'd never done operations management. And that's what McMaster-Carr afforded me, like this opportunity to manage people, design and manage processes, and then implement improvement projects that I saw along the way. So I basically got to see how a private company which has been around for over 100 years and has like huge margins, was able to basically keep its competitive advantage, keep costs low, create value for the customer, and just like make money year over year. That was my way of showing myself, okay, this is what excellence or, potential excellence could look like. And while I was there, stayed over a little over 2 years, I was also able to make good money because it was a profitable company and it paid really well. I was able to make good money, save that money. And after actually hitting yet another glass ceiling, I decided, okay, there's no better time than this. There's a pattern here. I keep going from big brand, big company name to big company name, and I get promoted at least once or twice. And then there comes a point where either I'm being disrespected and asked to train my manager and not recognized for that next level up, or I just downright get tired of it because it's not, coming from a place of personal passion or fulfillment, right?
Yeah.
And so that, February or January of this year, literally, I didn't even know. I would not recommend this for anybody in hindsight. But literally, I did not know I was going to resign on the Monday that I resigned.
Wow.
Yes.
I didn't know that part.
Yeah. Yes, Nikki. Like I got to work. I had literally just my former employer actually built a new facility, and we, some companies will say, okay, we're gonna stop operation and we're gonna move and tell our customers, hey, we're gonna be back in business in a month or something like that, right? Not this company, and it's probably why it's been successful so long. But the decision was to still fully operate and serve all clients while moving, and my department had to move overnight. And I managed that whole process. I moved the department overnight. I had to make sure they had all their equipment ready for them the next day, that were ready to get up and running. And in that process, with all the issues, until new processes got smoothed out in a new facility, we were working double overtime, like 2 hours in the morning, 1 to 2 hours in the afternoon overtime. And because I was one of the managers, I had to be there for all of those hours. And what happened right before then is I had asked for a vacation. I had even for like 1 week. After I had successfully moved my team over, and I even had a backup for me, fully trained, ready to go. And I was denied this while I was just like dead. And I got there that morning, and it just kind of hit me. I needed to make a change, and I just wrote my letter of resignation and just left.
Wow. So did you side hustle before did you have that in the back of your mind? Like you had started ruminating on some things and working on some things, or you just quit and then started to figure it out?
I quit and then started to figure it out. So what I did was I resigned, and then I stayed with the company a little bit more to transition, hand over my post. I try to keep it classy at the end. There's no need, to just blow up the place. So I trained my replacement, and I took that vacation, which was so important to me. I hadn't seen my family in a long time, and I actually had the opportunity to go to Colombia with my brother and his wife, who's from there, to spend a solid week in Colombia, just enjoying myself and drinking salpicon, which is like this awesome, like tropical fruit drink. Anyway, so having some salpicon. And when I came back with a fresh mindset and no job, I decided at that point, looking at my finances, projecting them out, knowing what my savings were, that I would give myself a year for the very first time, that I would give myself a year. I wasn't going to jump into a new job, because, of fear of not surviving, but rather I would take a bet on myself. I had about 11 months of savings, and that's what allowed me to, from February to now, start tinkering and using my skills and creating an initial business based on the skills and talents that I had acquired in the past.
Okay. So, emphasis on that financial preparation that you did for entrepreneurship, because that is very commendable. Like, I don't know many people with 11 months of savings. They say, what's the recommended amount? 6 months. So the fact that you were that diligent is really, really commendable. So now we are, going to transition away from that whole work experience, because the point of this episode is really to talk about how you've grown New Roots Development. So what were some of the first steps you took to start taking New Roots from idea to brand?
Okay. So, I actually read a very awesome book, Rich Dad's Before You Quit Your Job. It's crazy because I'd already quit, but it doesn't matter. But it's better to learn late than never. So the book is called Rich Dads Before You Quit Your Job, 10 Real Life Lessons Every Entrepreneur Should Know About Building a $1 million Business. That's a mouthful, by Robert Kiyosaki. A lot of people know him for his book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And in the book, it talks about the 5 components of a new business that you have to cover in order to succeed. And that's 1, having a product of some sort or a service, looking at legal, looking at your systems, creating a communication strategy, and thinking about your cash flow overall. And so the first thing I thought about was, okay, what's my product or service? And I thought about when I was in grad school and I was asked to serve as the managing editor of Columbia's Journal of International Affairs. I knew nothing about publishing at the time. I volunteered for that position while getting my degree. And little did I know that I would be responsible for co-managing with the editor-in-chief, a board of editors, and as in addition to 60 or so editorial assistants. And so I learned how to be the project manager for publishing what is the second oldest foreign affairs journal after Foreign Affairs magazine. And that, there were about 10,000 copies of each journal that went out to over 90 countries in the world. So through that experience, I actually learned the process of publishing and what makes for a good product at the end. And so for my company, I said, okay, I loved publishing books. I'm a writer myself. I had 2 poems published when I was 13 years old. And so I said, okay, let me build a publishing house. We'll start there. I'm a pretty good editor as well. And so I'm going to offer services based on my strength. I'm going to provide great editing. And I'm also going to help folks either through consulting or through actual publishing of their books as my initial product or service. And then the second thing that I did, because I realized that you couldn't have engagements with your clients without some document, right? Some legal document, some protections in place. And so I reached out to my network. And a network of lawyers, friends who are lawyers. We all know a lawyer or two. And if you don't, get to know one. And I was really fortunate to get some pro bono services, which is just awesome, not having to pay for them, and just having that support up front to draft my legal contracts and engaging with clients. I also got a lot of advice from my brother, who is, I think he's 3 years into his company now. He owns his own architectural firm. He's been an architect for over 10 years in New Jersey, and his systems were already developed. So he said, okay, Denise, check out Wave Accounting as the platform for your, for your overall accounting, where you can send invoices to your customer and classify all of your, outflows and inflows of money and create your financial statement. So if someone needs New Roots Development financial statements right now, I can produce them like real time, all my numbers accurate, balance sheet, income statement. And so my brother there kind of helped me figure out my systems, like how I was going to invoice folks and get paid was really great. And then on the communication side, which is huge, that, I have to tell you, marketing was and continues to be the place that I'm facing a lot of challenges because it's not my skill set. But I've been reaching out and finding some partners along the way to help me with the branding of New Roots. And that's the area where I need to focus the most going forward. And of course, with good marketing, then you'll get your cash flow.
Got it. So, by the way, what was the name of that accounting platform? Is it Wave?
Yes, Wave Accounting.
All right. I'll definitely also include that in the show notes. So speaking of marketing, you say that you continue to be challenged by it, but how did you approach your initial clients, and how are you going about acquiring clients while you work to improve your branding and marketing?
Well, it started with, I put my site up on Squarespace, and it was just like this bare bones website, and I was so proud of it. And over time, I realized, oh my gosh, this is not good at all. I need to spruce this up a little bit. Yeah. And so I actually contacted Christina Brown of Love Brown Sugar, and I went to one of her brunches and had like one-on-one time with her, just kind of using our, connection from, Penn Days and the friendship that we built when we were there as dancers in African rhythms.
Yes. I went to one of Christina's brunches too. Yeah, Christina is, I think, really the reason, the final trigger that got me to actually think about entrepreneurship. I went to one of her brunches, had a one-on-one session with her as well. So it's funny that you bring her up and that we're both, had that experience.
Yeah. She's so awesome. I'm very proud of her. And, her marketing success, her brand success is undeniable. Mm-hmm. And so knowing that was an area that I really need help with, I said, hey, Christina, I need your advice. I'm supposed to be on all these platforms. How do I manage this? How do you even get your Instagram images so nice? I just had a ton of questions, not really knowing where to start. And she let me know of Shani Separate's consulting, side hustle, also a Penn alum, and worked really closely with Shani. And she helped me actually do some really great marketing strategy work. We sat down, I shared with her the vision that I had for the company, and she really helped me lay the foundation and create, I didn't even know there were terms, branding assets, right? Mm-hmm. Create branding assets that transform my site. I wish I'd taken a photo of my site before I met Shani and after. But she really helped me take it to that next level. So now if you go to New Roots Dev, short for development, .com, it's just a much better overall site and experience to communicate to customers. So that was the first thing. For me, get the website going. I had the processes in place. The next thing was to start learning, focusing in on which platforms to use. Facebook and Instagram are still the two main ones that I use. And so just really learning how to use those tools has really been my focus.
Cool. So what are some of the best practices that you can share from what you've learned, and the growing pains that you've been through? What do you know now that you wish you knew then?
I know that marketing is super important, that it doesn't matter how good your product or your service is. If you don't have a system, in place to execute your marketing strategy, and you're not consistent with it, you're not going to reach your clients as easily. That was a huge wake up call for me, because my initial thought was, wow, like I had this great business idea. Folks are going to see it and they're going to like run to get help, but that's not the case at all. Like you have to court your customer in so many ways. And I continue to focus on building putting the systems in place to attract them, and making sure that I create value for them, because at the end of the day, that's what matters the most. It's not what you need, it's what your customer needs. I wanted to share with you that, we talked about this whole formation year. What actually ended up happening over time is I realized that for my business model, this being my first year as an entrepreneur, I had these firm ideas to start, but what's happened is they've really evolved so that it actually comes from a place of passion, passion for me. While I was building this business, I thought that I was helping folks with their business plan, a couple of people with that. I thought that I was helping folks with their resumes and that I was editing, magazines and, getting reviews from them. But really what was happening was I was becoming a life and business coach. And so once I realized that that's really what it is, that I'm doing, and once it kind of hit me that, you could try to be a jack of all trades, but you're going to become a master of none. I changed my strategy in that way. So, for my editing services, I have folks that I could contract to help me with the editing work if it gets out of control. On the publishing side, I enjoy that the most. I enjoy projects, being a project manager. And so a lot of that I still do. But in reaching out to my initial clients, what I've learned is it's really hit me that publishing is like more of it has more of a long-term benefit. Unless like one of the clients that you work with market their book so well, or you help them market their book so well that it becomes a New York Times bestseller. The reality is you may need to, as a publishing house, publish, more than 3 books, 5 books, 10 books to actually generate the revenue to sustain your business. Right. So I realized that couldn't be the only income stream for the business. And that was a huge realization. And even though I don't want to change that part of it, I recognize that it's going to take a little while before I start to enjoy the fruit of that, that of the business.
So, and we actually talk about that with a few entrepreneurs who've been on the show. It's like you start out sometimes with a few businesses before you hit on that sweet spot of the one that really takes you to the next level. So it sounds like with publishing, that's your core, that's your passion. But what you've really tapped into is the fact that people look to you for life and business coaching. Can you talk a little bit about how your business is structured to incorporate this realization?
Well, I have the umbrella company, New Roots Development, LLC. And basically, I just, I use that company to move the cash in and out, right? And whether I'm providing editing story,
that just sounded like an episode of Power or The Wire. But I know what you mean. Cash flow, which is good.
Thinking of it is, we talk about entrepreneurship, right? But at the end of the day, like it becomes, you have to think of your business as a living, breathing entity.
Yes.
Right. I'm glad you said that. I mentioned the word cash flow, but folks think, okay, I'm gonna have a business and I'm gonna make money, but you have to move cash to make money,
Right.
right? You have a plan for where this money is going. So a lot of folks don't know, but I want to share this with you all. I mentioned that my brother's an architect, right? You've heard the term real estate development. That's where New Roots development came from. At Wharton, even though I got an economics and finance degree, my concentration was real estate. So my long-term vision, I like the idea of thinking about having short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals, right? Um, I'm focusing on my publishing work, which I love, helping folks publish their books, publishing my own work, making some cash from editing, eventually focusing on my business of life coaching, business coaching. But I have to have a plan for that cash, right? And what I would like to do is move that into real assets, into to real estate, and work with my brothers in partnership to make that happen.
Got it. Thank you for clarifying that a little bit. But speaking of cash, and I want to get back to the publishing in a little bit, but how do you continue to financially sustain yourself given the unpredictable nature of entrepreneurship?
Okay, so I had to get, part of the reason a lot of services sprung to life was because of this very thing. So I thought, okay, I came out the blocks running. So my business was incorporated in late February, early March. I had written my poetry over the course of the 3 years prior. I rushed in and edited the work, went through the process of publishing the book, had it on Amazon, completed a Kickstarter to raise money, and got it out there and thought, okay, this book is going to sell and it's going to sustain me. Not the case, right? If you don't have, that reiterating that point, if you don't have a strategy to continually reach out to your potential client and find that person that's interested in your book, especially if you haven't built an audience before. And I didn't have that much of a social media presence before starting my company or following or anything of that sort. The book wasn't going to move. It wasn't going to create enough cash flow. So I started editing, and, helping the folks, whoever was around me. Some word of mouth was happening. I would get, other clients interested in different services. And that started bringing in some cash flow, but again, that wasn't enough. And so speaking engagements as well. One thing that was really good about having a book published was to be able to get out and do a speaking engagement. I recently spoke at the Decatur Book Festival as an emerging writer, and that was really nice because when you do that, then they ask for different minimums of books. Sometimes they'll sell your books for you. Sometimes you get your own booth to sell your books from. But for this particular festival, they took initially 20 of my books and set it on the table, and I got to speak and answer people's questions, engage with folks that were interested in the work, and generate some money through book sales at that festival. So it was really unpredictable for these first few months. It's been very unpredictable. And so one major development is after these months, and with a clear vision of getting the training, completing the training that I need to become a certified life coach. I don't refer to myself as certified yet because you can start life coaching without a certification, but I like to do things by the book. That's just who I am. And so I'm actually enrolled in a class. I'm taking courses as we speak in life coaching. And by the end of November, I can use the title officially as a certified life coach. And for those who are interested in entering into that space, it's, you have to find a school that is accredited through the International Coaching Federation called ICF. And that's how it's a program. And also, do your research, see if you can find find anybody who's done the program before and, what they think of the training, if, it really gave them the tools needed to positively impact people's lives and share in those transitional moments with them to help them be, create fuller, healthier lives. You want to make sure that you find the right program to help you do that.
Got it. Now, you did publish your own book of poetry, and I want to get into that now. So what are some of the first steps you took to do that? Like, tell us about the process. How do you self-publish? What do we need to know? And how do you raise money on Kickstarter?
Okay, so with self-publishing, the very first thing is to have your work, written. It sounds silly, but like with my poetry, most of it I had wrote over the course of the last 3 years. A lot of it through my divorce and overcoming a lot of that. And so that's where the title came from, A Clean Closet. It's about ridding yourself of those unnecessary mental blockages or, old challenges within you, so that you could actually move forward and have a great life. And, I mentioned it before that writing is, I mean, there are a lot of studies that talk about the positive effect of journaling. And I would recommend that if you're an entrepreneur, if you're just a human being in general and you want to invest in your mental health and alongside your physical, your spiritual, your emotional health, journaling is a really awesome way to do that. And so to answer your question, I had my poems written. The next step was I put my editing hat on and I edited my work. I had it reviewed by one of my good friends that has her master's from Columbia in creative writing. So she also helped me do a round of editing with that. And once it was edited and ready to go, I leveraged both my existing knowledge of publishing and I also, let's see if I could find the name of this book, but I also read a really great book on self-publishing. It helped me recognize some of the most important pieces of it. So, for example, a lot of people don't know this, but once you've written a book, you own it. It's your book. It's your property. But you want to make sure that you get your copyright. So once the book is written, and you have the final draft of it, you want to make your submission to, I think it's copyright.gov, the government, the official government site, and pay the $35 fee. Make sure that your work is properly copyrighted. Another great thing is making sure, not a lot of people do this, but I think cataloging is important. And I take that initial step because I consider my company to be a true publishing house. Like we use, for example, the Chicago Manual of Style, which is like, industry standard for thinking about how to edit and format your work properly. A lot of folks go in and they say, okay, well, I know where a comma goes and I know where a period goes. No, like you need to edit it properly and check out the Chicago Manual of Style. You should be able to get that at any bookstore or, find it in a library to help you really edit your work well.
And then once you did that, you did your Kickstarter.
Yeah. So like after I did all those little things, I found the name of the book, The Complete Guide to Self-Publishing, and it's by Marilyn Ross and Sue Collier.
Awesome. I will link to that in the show notes too. The show notes for this episode are going to be popping, just so you guys know. But yeah, tell us about the whole Kickstarter, because Denise also wrote a post called The 10 Things I Learned Fundraising via Kickstarter, and that's available on denisesarkor.com. I'll also link to that, but share a few of those tips with us.
So for the Kickstarter process, like if you go on Kickstarter right now, there's probably somebody who's done a project similar to yours, unless there's something so unique that you're doing that, there's no example, but you can still get guidance from any existing project on there. So one of the first things I did was I went on there and I looked at different publishing projects that were there. And I found that folks, they use Kickstarter in very different ways. Like, so there are folks on there that had an idea of how to raise money for a book, but had an idea for the book itself, who hadn't even written it, right? And they were like trying to raise money. They haven't written the book. They've made some estimates of what everything is going to cost. I'm a little bit more risk averse. So I actually wrote my book, edited it, published it, submitted it through my printer and distributor. And by the way, like, you know, there are several options. Like, a lot of people use CreateSpace, which is Amazon's arm. I like Ingram Spark because their quality is a little better. You may lose a tiny bit of your margin to do that, but you know, if you want a certain quality, and that I want to give to my clients as well, like I use Ingram Spark. And so, like, I published the book, submitted it, knew that I had about 5 days before it hit Amazon. And over the course of that, I was drafting what I wanted my Kickstarter to look like. So if you search for the Clean Poetry series on Kickstarter, you'll see that in the risk section at the end, because for every Kickstarter, you have to mention the risk. I say clearly to folks, hey, like, I can print. My publishing house can currently print your book at any time. It was the first book, and we're offering it as a reward for anybody who supports this Kickstarter. And the main purpose of the Kickstarter was, one, to create awareness of New Roots development as a publishing house and demonstrate that we know how to publish a book. It was also to promote the author, who in this case happened to be me, and poetry that I had written. And offer that as a gift. I would say that, like, those were the main reasons. But the last one was to help raise $1,000 to create the audiobook content. So there are a lot of things going on. I had to separate Denise, the author, Denise, the business owner. And if you produce a book of poetry specifically, marketing poetry is very different from other types of books. And, you know, like, a lot of poets go on to, like, have a stage presence and do all these other things to really get the work out there. So, you know, do slams. You guys are probably all aware of, like, Def Poetry Jam and stuff like that. So marketing poetry is really different. And one of the things I wanted to do was raise $1,000 to help me after publishing the whole Clean Poetry series, which is going to be 3 books made out of 3 books. I wanted to raise the $1,000 to create an audiobook so that folks could actually hear me recite the poetry, which is really personal to me and can only be delivered in the way that I want to deliver it, you know?
Yeah.
So I wanted to put that personal touch and reach the audience with an audiobook. So that's one of the projects I'm going to be completing in 2017.
Awesome. So before we get into into the lightning round, can you talk about what has been the most surprising aspect of this, your first year of entrepreneurship? Was it as scary and intimidating as you thought?
Yeah. No, like you, no, I'm not trying to scare anyone. You do experience a lot of emotions. You do experience a lot of emotions. I think we can all relate to this idea of enjoying the security of a paycheck, right? You know it's coming in, and you know what your outflow is going to be, and typically what you can save. And there is a lot of comfort around that. For me, it was, it's an emotional roller coaster. But there always seemed to be, like, some silver lining, like, oh man, I don't know what's going on, like, with this, for example, going through my Kickstarter process, had to do heavy marketing throughout it. And in the middle of that 29 days of the Kickstarter, the first movers had already backed the project, but then it slowed for a while. And I tell you, like, it was torture during that time, because in my mind, I was like, if this fails, like, this is the first project that we're doing out of New Roots, like, I don't know if you've seen Shark Tank episodes where folks say their Kickstarter failed. It's like doom and gloom. So I was like, no, this can't fail. And so like I remember the emotion of that and having to lean on entrepreneur communities on Facebook and just be like, guys, like this is what's going on. Do you have any advice on how I can increase my visibility and help ensure that this Kickstarter is a success? So that's just one example, right? And then there's the different experiences you go through, like, you're so close to getting a client. And, they come back to you in the case of publishing and they're like, okay, I didn't complete the drafts in time. I need another year to finish my book. Okay. So that slows down the process considerably. And so it's just kind of, not losing faith in your idea, but just pressing forward when things don't go, your way. So, and then also managing all the surprises, like you're not like recognizing that you're not going to be able to do everything yourself, and leveraging your strengths, collaborating when you can, joining mastermind groups, different things like that could really help give you the support that you need at different points on the journey.
Got it. So what are you working on next? You mentioned the audiobook. What other projects are in the works?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things. It's not like securing a job and then making my business a side hustle, right? So a lot of people create their side hustle while they're at a job. I took the leap, built the business or the foundation of the business. And now while I'm finishing my life coaching certification, stepping into either part-time or full-time employment again. Good thing is I'm in like third rounds with 2 companies right now. So we'll see what happens. So that's the first thing.
Wait. That is huge. We can't just skip over this. Wait. Talk us through that thought process of now that you've picked up some steam and you're training to be a life coach, you actually want to go back into the full-time workspace. Why is that?
Yeah, it's because I was my main investor. I also had, I secured like a line of credit for the business, which was substantial and is substantial. And also like, credit, credit card. But I used some of it where I thought it strategically made sense. But I had to recognize what my business model is. So, depending on your business, your decisions are going to have to be different. And I think that's the major thing I learned through this whole year is that you have to be flexible and you have to be smart. So I did my projections. Things look great when I raised that over $6,000 on just one book project, right? Things look great when, a couple of people, bit the marketing and said, hey, like I'm interested in working with you to publish my book. But then over time, it just wasn't sustainable enough yet. And I needed a lot more funds to invest on the marketing piece. And, if you're worried about your survival, and assuming you've made all the changes you can, cut all the costs around that are unnecessary, and you're running lean, and you aren't generating as much income as you need, you have to make a smart decision. And that's the position that I'm in now, where I have to find something on the side while I continue to build the business. It takes some mental strength.
Yeah, it certainly does. And it's nothing to be ashamed of either. It's really being a smart businesswoman. It's saying, okay, what decision do I need to make next so that I can build this business out? You did your projections. You need more funds. So we're going to go back. We're going to get another investor, which in this case is a job. And we're going to get the funds back to where it needs to be. We're going to raise capital.
Yes, you got it. You got it. Exactly.
It's all strategic. So good to know. Good to know. Keep us posted on the progress on that. We'll probably do some check-ins in the mastermind group. You guys, if you're not already in the Side Hustle Pro Facebook community, you are missing out. Just go to sidehustlepro.co/mastermind because we'll definitely be doing some updates with Denise there. So now let's get into the lightning round. Now, this is going to go kind of quick. We're going to ask you 5 questions and you'll answer the first thing that comes to mind. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So number 1, what is your secret to getting things done?
All right. So the big one is self-care in the gym. That's huge. You need energy to do all this stuff. And going to the gym helps me out a lot. That and finding quiet spaces like cafes to work in. I'm really productive in cafes.
Okay. Number 2, what's an internet resource or many internet resources that you can share with the Side Hustle Pro audience?
Related to your first question about getting things done, like one of the tools I rely on pretty heavily is Todoist, because like initially I was using my regular to-do list through my iPhone, and that wasn't enough. Like it wasn't. It was just like a list that I was checking all the time, and I couldn't really see my progress. But Todoist helps you like specify which task goes with which project and put a deadline on it. So I use that tool, and it really helps me clear my mind. Like when I think about something that I need to do, I immediately log it, categorize it in under the right project, give it a due date, and that helps me a lot. Another one that I'm using with my brothers on like our like real estate related projects is Asana. And that tool is pretty cool, I think, for managing projects with more than one person or small teams.
Cool. And number 3, what's been the best business book or podcast that you've consumed this year?
The best business book I've consumed is by leadership expert John C. Maxwell. He wrote this book, The 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth. It's just like, that's the kind of text that really moves me, understanding like how I have to grow in order to be my best self, to operate well, to manage my business well, to people well, processes well. And that book talks about really adulting. Like he does it in a really awesome way and shows you like all like 15 key ways in which you need to grow. Like there's even a chapter in there called like the law of pain. Like, and from my life and business coaching work, like I can speak to that. And from my life experiences, I can speak to that sometimes being in the most challenging situations are what give us our strength, our resilience, our courage, and all those things. So that book is incredible to get you productive and operating with clarity.
Nice one. And number 4, who inspires you and why?
So if it's my mom is number 1, she's an incredible human being. When I look at her life, I'm impressed over and over again. And as I grow up, I'm even more impressed with her. Like, and just how she performed as a mother and as a professional. She just celebrated 25 years at her job. And there's a poem that I really like called On Children, where it says that so as the archer talking about God loves that flies or children, so does he love the steady bow. And my mother has been a source of consistency in my life like no other. So I give credit to her first. Second to that is Auntie Oprah.
Of course. And number 5, what's a personal trait that contributes to your success?
For me, it's common courtesy and genuine love and respect for humanity, empathy, and love for people.
Can you end with some parting advice to fellow women entrepreneurs who, they dream of working for themselves, but they don't know where to start?
I think one of the key things is to Trust that we've all been equipped with gifts and talents. Know who you are, know your gifts and talents, and seek to share that with the world. Something I didn't mention is in this book by, I think it's Tim Ferriss, The 4-Hour Work Week. He has a process called dreamlining, which is really effective. I think start with what your dreams are, what kind of life you want to have, the things you dream of. In exercise, you put the things you dream of being, doing, and having. And then you come up with a plan of how you can create a business that will earn you enough to be, do, and have the stuff of your dreams. So start from that place, the place that's going to create that passion in you, that fire in you, that's going to sustain your business. Because honestly, without passion, you're going to see the success because you're not going to be giving value in the area where you have a strength. So that's number one. And number two is adjust. As you go along, you have a goal that's in front of you. It might not be a straight shot. And I hope that me sharing my experience shows you that. Like I have to go back. It's a major transition to think about having to go back to an employer for a while, but I'm very clear in my mind that, as Nikki said, I'm seeking my next investor, and keeping my eyes on the prize. The last thing I want to say is that it's worth it. Just yesterday, I got a handwritten note from poet, author, activist, a living legend, recently recognized by Oprah Winfrey as a living legend. And you may know her as Nikki Giovanni. I got a handwritten letter from her. She read my poetry and she loved it. And I got that in the mail. I was running around my house like a crazy woman, just in joy. That's enough. That alone, Nikki, is enough for me to say that I took this year for myself. I gave my poetry to the world, and I got recognized by one of the best poets of our lifetime. So do it.
Yeah, I'm so glad because I saw that post on Facebook and, I know when your friends tell you how incredible that work of poetry is, you're like, oh, okay, but they're my friends. So I'm so glad that Nikki Giovanni sent you that personal letter because we're not exaggerating. It's a phenomenal work. I can't even believe I know, someone who could articulate what has been a really traumatic experience in this way that, just I actually finished reading it and felt a sense of calm and a felt of like empowerment to take on anything. So I will also link to that in the show notes, you guys. Denise's Clean Closet is just incredible. And Nikki Giovanni knows it too. So boom, there you go. So what's the best way for us to connect with you after this episode?
The best way, I simplified it. I learned from a marketing strategist the importance of simplifying things for folks. You can find me at denisesarkor.com and across all social media platforms, not all, but Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at Denise Sarkor.
Awesome. All right, Denise. Well, it's been a pleasure having you. And there you have it. Hey guys, thanks for listening to Side Hustle Pro. If you want to hear more from me, head on over to sidehustlepro.co/Side Hustle Corner to get my weekly Side Hustle Diaries chronicles about my own journey from passion project to profitable business. And if you want to find me online, I'm at Side Hustle Pro on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Don't forget to join the Side Hustle Pro Facebook community. Go to sidehustlepro.co/mastermind. And as always, if you love the show, do me a favor and subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. Thanks, guys. Talk to you next week.